Welcome to Awakening Faith with Roger Spradlin.
Welcome to Awakening Faith. I'm Roger Spradlin, and I'm here today to share with you a testimony of a miracle that had taken place on New Year's Eve, 1980. My mother had fallen and broken her back right after the holidays, and Sherry and I, living in Ohio, they had called me and told me that she was in critical condition. So we went down that New Year's Eve. When I arrived at the hospital, my mother was lying in a special unit, and her stomach was so swollen, and they didn't know if she was going to make it, going to live. They really didn't know what they was going to do with her age. And so my sister said that they were having watch night service. Her father-in-law in Jamestown, Kentucky, pastored a church there. It's a little home missions church in a storefront. And she said, I think we ought to go to church. And only been in the church since Labor Day of that year, I really didn't know a whole lot about how God worked and stuff. I just knew that I loved him and I believed that he could do anything. And so I was in prayer and I asked the Lord, should I go to that service or should I stay here with my mother? And the Lord spoke to me. It was one of the first times that I heard him speak to me, and he said, I want you to go to church tonight. So I went with my sister, and I knew a few people there, not too many. And that little storefront church was pretty packed. There was no room for extra people to sit down. They were standing room only. And they started the service. The music was great, and the move of the Spirit seemed to be real good, and I really enjoyed it. And then I heard a voice that said to me, and he asked me, he said, run. Well, I didn't know what to do. This was unusual to me, and I'm in a crowd of people that I don't really know very many. And if I get out and run, they're liable to throw me out of the church. And so the pastor stopped the service, stopped the music, and he said, somebody in here is quenching the Holy Ghost. And I thought, oh, Lord, it's me. So he made an altar call, and I went up to the altar, but look around, the altar was full. And I thought, well, it couldn't be me he's talking to. And so after we had a season of prayer, we went back to our seats, and they began to sing and worship again. And then I heard the voice a second time, and the second time it said to me, he said, if you will run, I will heal your mother. And I thought, Lord, is this real? Are you talking to me? I mean, I was really struggling with it. And the pastor took the mic again and said, somebody needs to just pray through or answer what the Holy Ghost is trying to do to them. And so they started the music again and started playing. And all of a sudden, I heard the voice the third time, and it said to me, I said, run. And I began to say within myself, Lord, is this you? And something hit the side of my face. It numbed my face. It was a slap was what it was. But there was nobody close enough on the side to be able to slap me. And I just bursted out and took off running. And that whole place erupted with people running and dancing and shouting. And what a service that ended up being. 3 young men accepted their call into the ministry that night. And so at the conclusion of the service, I was with my sister, and she said, there was something strange happened. She said, the Lord spoke to me and said if I would run, he would heal my mother. Well, she had been in church probably 2-3 years, and she should have known the voice of the Lord. But she said, I didn't do it. I questioned it, and then you got out and run. And so we kind of chuckled about it and thought, well, I believe the Lord's going to do something. I believe he honors his word. And so that evening after the service, we had stopped back over to the hospital, and Mom was resting, so we didn't do anything that night. But the next morning when I went back to the hospital, the doctor was in there with my mother and my older sister, and I believe my next to my older sister was with her. And they were my older sister was kind of giving the doctor some static and about what he was going to do to my mother, what's going to take place. And the doctor looked at her and told her, he said, anybody can look and tell that something miraculous has taken place here. And so my mother ended up being released from the hospital. And so we just believed God had performed the miracle. Well, God always confirms everything. I really do believe it when it's a miracle. And miracles sometimes will cause a skeptic to doubt, but the believer to believe. And so it went on till 1995 when my mother passed away. But just before she did, she had been in the hospital 13 times that year. And she passed away on Christmas Day of that year. And there was a lady doctor that was taking care of her at the hospital. And I asked the lady doctor, I said, how's my mother doing? And of course, she gave me that she wasn't going to be long. She didn't have long to live. But she asked me something that I had not even thought about for all them years between that time and 1980. And she asked me, she said, did you know that your mother had a broken back? And I said, yes, ma'am, I do. And God had healed her of that broken back. And I remember that when I get sick or when I see anybody, that God can do anything. And sometimes He will ask us sometimes to do something. It may sound kind of a little bit crazy. Not all the time does He do it this way. But sometimes He may ask you to do something that is a little bit different than what you're used to doing. But trust the Lord and respond to how He talks to you. And you might be surprised at what God does. Now, sometimes God just performs a miracle just straight out and there's nothing required. You just merely believe. But sometimes He'll ask you to do something. So I hope maybe that this might encourage somebody. If God speaks to your heart about a miracle and He asks you to do something, don't be afraid to do it. You have nothing to lose to listen to that voice, and God does talk to us. And if you don't know how to hear the voice of God, you need to pray and say, God, help me to hear when you talk. And sometimes you have to shut up within yourself and listen to see if God talks to you. So often we just begin to pray and we never shut up. We just keep on praying. But I have learned that when I pray, to have that quiet moment of time where I listen to see if God is going to speak to me. And God has spoken to me many times, and I know His voice and I understand Him. And so if you're struggling with that, pray about that and ask God to help you to do that. I really hope that this may help somebody. Miracles need to be heard about today. This generation is not hearing about how powerful and mighty our God is. For in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, there were mighty miracles that took place. But something has taken place over the last few years that where the children of God are not really believing that God or looking for God to do those things. Sometimes we look to doctors for our help, and that's all right. Doctors are given their ability by God. They can cut you open, but they can't heal you. Only God can heal. And so learn to listen to God. Learn to pay attention to His voice and see if He will talk to you. If this has helped you any, and maybe you know somebody in a circumstance similar to this, that you can just pass this along to somebody else that it may help them. And until the next time with another miracle, this is Roger Spradlin with Awakening Faith, saying, pass your faith to someone else. Pass it along. And God bless.
You've been listening to Awakening Faith with Roger Spradlin. If you're interested in hearing additional podcasts, visit us at www.awakeningprayer.org.